Hello, this is Jay Mitchell. We are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Marijuana User Cannot Be Banned from Gun Ownership, U.S. Court Rules, original title from Readers.com by Doctor Who 07. And I would agree very much with that. I think anyone who wants to should be able to own a gun, even if they might be considered dangerous and potentially being able to hurt other people, because the Second Amendment is a right, not a privilege. The government just can't take it away from you. That's what a right is. A privilege is something that the government should be able to take away. Is something that the government can take away from you. A right isn't, and that's very much what the Second Amendment is, according to the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights, I should say. Then we have judge grants restraining order against cybersecurity expert who exposed the extent of city's data breach from 10tv.com by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I personally think we should be holding the government accountable like this expert was, but it just goes to show you that the government, if you try to hold them accountable, will just try and attack you in return, and that's why you got to stand up against the government and its authoritarian tendencies like this, and that's my thoughts there. And then we have Trump promises government will pay for IVF for all Americans under his administration from DailyWire.com by Donald Key, and that's crosswords from the conservative subreddit. And I think I think if people want to get IVF, they should be able to do so. With that being said, much like with abortion, I don't think it's the government's job to pay for it, and that's my thoughts there. Then we have Trump can soon tap his $2 billion true social fortune, but it won't be easy from Baton 13, and that's a crossword from the GJT Uncensored subreddit. And yeah, I personally, so it says, in theory, with this, will give Trump access to a pot of money that he could use to pay high legal fees or even fund his presidential campaign. In reality, Trump faces huge obstacles that would make it very challenging to sell large Trump media unless he doesn't mind crashing the stock. And I think they'll probably crash the stock and he'll cash out. But yeah, I don't think Trump's ever going to have money issues. But that's the narrative is he's always in money trouble. But he's got a whole army who will pay whatever money they want. It's all a grift. I personally don't care for all the legal attacks against him. I think a lot of them really just constitute lawfare. But with that being said, it's all really just a grift. U.S. politics is really pretty much all grift, and Trump is not an exception there. Now we have Elon Musk's X labels NPR story on Donald Trump Arlington Cemetery as unsafe from thehill.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that, but Reddit censors links to some websites as well, like InfoWars, The Post Millennial, and Rumble, and I don't see Reddit crying about that. Reddit only cares since Elon is in the out group. I'm not seeing any story on the subreddit about how Brazil is banning Twitter, or X as they now call it, and that's because that they're more supportive of that because Elon's in the out group, so they want it to be censored, and increasingly they care about censorship only when it's the out group doing it and not the in group doing it. A while ago I shared a post from a subreddit about how Trump wants to restrict the First Amendment. That freaked up votes when I posted about how Tim Wall says there's no exception in the First Amendment for hate speech and misinformation. That got downvoted. And it just goes to show you how it doesn't matter really who says something. It matters whether they're in group. I mean, it doesn't matter really what someone says. Rather, it matters whether they're in the in group or the out group. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Vance calls booing firefighters haters during speech to union from Salon.com by Radner OKXG, and that's crosswords from the Politicus subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that, but I think if the firefighters want to boo them, they should be able to, and I think if he wants to call them haters, he should be able to as well. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. Then we have Russia hands an 8-year prison term to newspaper publisher in Siberia over Ukraine war criticism. Here's what real government censorship looks like from WinnipegSun.com by Patom 13. And I would agree that it's censorship is bad when Russia does it, but the West is increasingly censoring like Russia. Like the UK, they're arresting people for tweets they make. In France, they arrested the CEO of Telegram. In Brazil, they banned Twitter and might make VPNs legal and arrest people who use them as well. In the US, they're going to ban TikTok. But Russia, it's bad. Everyone knows Russia's bad, but increasingly the West is as bad as Russia, but it's not treated as such, and I think that's very hypocritical, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have map shows which states have the highest crime rate from Newsweek.com, and that's from Baton 13, and it looks like mostly let's see, I guess it would be mostly the more looks like mostly in the South, I guess. This might be just a Republicans' bad post, but New Mexico looks like a pretty high crime rate, and that's a Democratic state. So I guess maybe it's I don't know. I personally think anyone can manipulate data to suit their political agenda, and I think people need to really realize that these days. Because that's why I think a lot of stuff like this is which what state has the highest crime rate. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have black mold, flies and roaches, rancid smells, no wonder boar's head caused listeria outbreak, free market response from boingboing.net by Baton 13. And, I personally don't care for a listeria outbreak, but, I think the free market response is, to stop using their products. I think if people want to use boarheads, even though if they've had a listeria outbreak, to be able to, but, the free market perspective is sometimes bad things happen to a company's products, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. So ultimately, justify whatever you want to. Just don't tell Boar's Head what they can and can't produce. Then we have Corporate Greed Timeline from Chunky Lover 92, and that's a timeline about how looks like there was post-war greed spikes, and then, let's see, it's a history of the times where corporations decided to be greedy or generous suddenly and for no particular reason, and that's, pretty much how corporations were generous when the economy was doing well, but then when it's not doing too well, they get kind of greedy, it says. And that's just kind of how the media says, oh, it's price controls, and... yeah, my thoughts on, the media's trying to push this price control narrative, and I personally don't think that's very libertarian, and it's really it's really the Federal Reserve just printing money, and that's what I think the real thing is. Like how they printed money during COVID, and now we're seeing the effects of that. But the TV wants people to go off corporate greed. And that just goes to show you how, the media tries to program these narratives into people, and usually it ends up working, but thanks to social media, increasingly it's starting to fail, and I think we'll only see that accelerate as time moves on. Then we'll have the definition of hypocrisy from Help with Eating, and that's a crossword from the Black Heel Twitter subreddit, and that's a tweet from Keith Boykin. Republicans are complaining that Oprah Winfrey spoke at the Democratic convention because she's a Hollywood billionaire, and yet they nominate Donald Trump, a billionaire celebrity, to star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to be their presidential candidate. And that just goes to show you how both parties are really completely run by, I would say, the billionaire class. And in some ways, I think the Republican Party is trying to present itself as a more economically populist party. But that being said, they're both the party of the rich, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have a reporter detailed a tennis star's alleged abuse. Now he's paying for it from WashingtonPost.com by Ninja Lover. They had an interesting update to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And yeah, I personally think we need freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So I personally think, that this reporter apparently went after the German tennis player Alexander Zverev. I personally don't really care for the press and all their slander campaigns, but ultimately I do think they should have the freedom of speech to do them if they want, and that's my thoughts there. Then we have move to Texas for conservative values, move back to California because Texas is pretty awful. Maybe taxes aren't everything, from BusinessInsider.com by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the Leopards Ate My Face subreddit. And yeah, ultimately, some states, some people might prefer some states to other states. increasingly, people want to be with people who are like them and vote the same way, and that's why increasingly, states are becoming these ideological echo chambers similar to the ones you have online, I think, and this is just another example of that, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have a pedophile filmed kids at Disney World to make child abuse images, cops say, from Forbes.com by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the Tech News subreddit. And my thoughts on that are, I personally don't think you should be filming people without their consent. And I think that you could argue that's a NAT violation. I do think, AI and this child porn, that opens up an interesting rabbit hole about, what should be legal when it comes to content generation. I personally think if you want to keep that shit to yourself, I guess you could have an argument about it should be legal, but don't try and do stuff like this and or normalize that out in society, because that's increasingly I would say, libertarian positions, you should be able to do whatever you want to as long as you're not hurting anyone else. With that being said, if what you do is weird or freaky, the libertarian position is, you should be able to have an opinion on that, and even if you don't want the state to enforce making what you think is weird or freaky illegal, that still means, we still should be able to say it's wrong and I don't care for it. It's a libertarian position to say stuff like homosexuality and abortion is immoral, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be illegal, and that's my thoughts there. So yeah, I personally don't care for this, but I think it's an interesting in terms of legality of if it should be legal or not. Then we have small town firefighters saw through the Arizona border while to rescue an injured man who waited 24 hours for help from azluminaria.org by CH4Locks. And yeah, that just goes to show you how sometimes, building a border wall might not be a good idea. But, I do think, the border wall is a well-intentioned idea. I do think all this illegal immigration is starting to catch up with the U.S. I just heard a Venezuelan gang occupied an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, and that goes to show you that immigration, open borders, I think, very much is a libertarian position, but, open borders do come with drawbacks as well, and that's important to remember. Then we have evangelical broadcasters sue IRS for right to endorse candidates without penalty. The lawsuit calls for the Johnson Amendment to be declared unconstitutional from friendlyatheist.com, and that's from Swamp Yankee Dan. And, I personally think people should be able to endorse whoever they want, even if they're a private religious organization, and that's my thoughts on that issue. I think it's freedom of speech, and that's why I would say, I think nonprofits, there's a lot of laws against them being involved in politics, but I personally think if they want to be involved in politics, they should be able to. Then we have new labor law, more worker democracy or clever union busting from Lemon Limelight, and they said the Wall Street Journal editorial board writes about the interesting situation in Florida. The Miami Teachers Union election emphasis added, United Teachers of Dade, UDT, represents school employees in Miami-Dade County. A governor-run census law signed last year requires public unions to prove their popularity to keep power. If a union can't show that 60% of its bargaining unit is dues-paying members, it must hold an election to keep its certification. Last year, UTD came close, 56%, but fell short by about 878. To continue representing Miami teachers, it now needs to win 50% of return ballots. And ultimately, I think, I think if people want to form a union, I think they should be able to. I don't think there should be any rules regarding that. I'm very much anti-government rules, just like I'm very, anti-social media platform rules. People should make their own rules rather than have the government make rules about saying what constitutes a valid union and what doesn't. And then they added, is this healthy competition against unions? Will it help or hurt workers? And I think, form a union if you want. But, ultimately, if people don't like it, they should be free to leave or join another union or not be in the union at all. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.